The release of the Republican tax bill is being delayed until Thursday, according to sources with direct knowledge. The delay of the scheduled release by the House Ways and Means Committee reveals the difficulties the team has had in resolving how to raise enough money to pay for the massive corporate tax cuts. Political hot-button issues, like the treatment of 401k savings, are still in flux. The delay should affect the timing for the markup, which is expected to happen Monday. An attacker plowed a large truck into a Bastille Day celebration in July 2016, killing 84 people and injuring over 200 others. It was labeled an act of terror and ISIS claimed responsibility. 14 people were killed in August and more than 100 wounded when an attacker in a van struck pedestrians in a tourist hotspot. It was investigated as an act of terror, and ISIS claimed responsibility. A truck was driven into a Christmas market December 2016, killing 12 and injuring dozens more. It was investigated as an act of terrorism, and the perpetrator had pledged loyalty to ISIS. 5 people were killed and dozens more injured in March when a man drove an SUV onto Westminster Bridge, and then exited the vehicle and stabbed a police officer. He was killed shortly after. A man drove into a crowd in April, killing 4 and leaving another dozen injured. He was held on suspicion of terrorist crimes. An attacker drove his car into a crowd of people at Ohio State University, then exited the car and charged at students with a knife, injuring 11 people. He was killed shortly after. Worth noting, as we saw with the Times Square incident earlier this year, in which a young woman was killed, these vehicular incidents sometimes spark concerns of terrorism but prove not to be terrorism-related. The numbers: tens of thousands lost everything in what has proven to be the deadliest and one of the most costly set of wildfires in our state's history, California's insurance commissioner told reporters. Per CNBC, the total death count has risen to 42. A single Sonoma County fire, the Tubbs, killed 22 people, which makes it the third deadliest in state history, NBC reports. The Tubbs fire alone destroyed 5,300 homes, more than any other California fire in history. In total, 14,700 structures, 728 businesses and 271,000 acres have burned. At the peak of the fires, classes were canceled for 260,000 students at 600 schools, per KQED. President Trump has taken to Twitter to react to the apparent terrorist attack in New York City. Worth noting, officials have not said this attack is linked to ISIS. A new MIT Media Lab project that generates scary stories with the help of other Twitter users is hinting at a future of human collaboration, according to a co-design report. Shelley, named after Frankenstein author Mary Shelley, tweets out the start to a new scary tale every hour, and invites other Twitter users to add on to her story. If a response is popular enough, Shelley continues the thread with the next sentence. The MIT team made Shelley by training a neural network of 140,000 horror stories from the RNO Sleep subreddit, a collection of original scary stories. Why it matters: it's no easy feat to create AI that can write fluently, and co-design notes that Shelley augments and complements human capacity, rather than replacing it. Jeb Hensarling of Texas State announced October 31 terms 82,016 margin of victory 61 points 2016 presidential Trump by 28 points. Pat Tiberi of Ohio date reported October 18 terms 92,016 margin of victory 37 points 2016 presidential Trump by 11 points. Tim Murphy of Pennsylvania resigned in scandal date announced October 5 terms 7 full terms 2016 margin of victory uncontested 2016 presidential Trump by 20 points. Dave Trott of Michigan date announced Sept. 11 terms 22,016 margin of victory 13 points 2016 presidential Trump by 5 points. Charlie Dent of Pennsylvania date announced Sept. 7 terms 72,016 margin of victory 20 points 2016 presidential Trump by 8 points. Dave Reichert of Washington date announced Sept. 6 terms 72,016 margin of victory 20 points 2016 presidential Clinton by 3 points. John J. Duncan Jr. of Tennessee date announced July 31 terms 15 full terms 2016 margin of victory 51 points 2016 presidential Trump by 35 points. Jason Chaffetz of Utah left office in June date announced May 18 terms 4 full terms 2016 margin of victory 47 points 2016 presidential Trump by 24 points. Ileana Ros-Lehtinen of Florida date announced April 30 terms 14 full terms 2016 margin of victory 10 points 2016 presidential Clinton by 20 points date announced January 25 terms 50 2016 margin of victory 28 points 2016 presidential Trump by 19 points date announced January 6 terms 13 full terms 2016 margin of victory 27 points 2016 presidential Trump by 14 points more highlights Sen. Al Franken had a tense exchange with Stretch over whether the company would ban political ads from being purchased in foreign currency. "My goal is for you to think through this stuff a little bit better," he finally said. Sen. John Kennedy aggressively pushed Stretch on the company's ability to police its platform. "I think you do enormous good, but your power sometimes scares me," he said. "You've got 5 million advertisers, and you're going to tell me that you're able to trace the origin of all of those advertisements?" Multiple lawmakers questioned why Facebook and others had taken so long to become engaged with this issue. "There's a lot that I think you could have done earlier," said Sen. Patrick Leahy. Sen. Chris Coons questioned why it had taken 11 months for Facebook to come forward with the information it has recently. Stretch defended the company's response, telling Coons that they had produced a white paper on the issue in April. There were also questions about the ability of the platforms to balance free speech with policing misuse. "How are you going to sort this out consistent with the basic values of this country when it comes to freedom of expression?" asked Sen. Dick Durbin. Sen. Ted Cruz expressed worries about Silicon Valley companies actively censoring speech. He cited Twitter's decision to block some conservative ad content in one case that was reversed and the controversy over conservative stories potentially being downplayed in Facebook's trending topics module. "Do you consider your site to be a neutral public forum?" Cruz asked. Witnesses made clear this is an ongoing issue. Following the election, that activity "we'd seen really continued," said Stretch, noting that the content of the campaign had started to question President Trump's election. "It continued until we disabled the accounts." Google announced steps to increase transparency around political ads. Google's Richard Salgado said the company would roll out an election ads transparency report next year and make it possible for users to see who had paid for political ads. Facebook and Twitter rolled out similar policies ahead of the hearing, but Google also distanced itself from the other companies. Salgado argued that the company's products don't lend themselves to the sort of viral content that makes Facebook and Twitter such a powerful tool. The companies were asked what they'd learned from the hearing. Facebook Stretch. "I've learned the seriousness of this committee and its approach to this topic." Twitter's Sean Edgett. "I've learned we have a lot more work to do and we're focused on doing that." Salgado. "I think it's quite clear that this is a problem that's going to take the work of all the companies, policymakers, law enforcement and NGOs to solve." Go Deeper. Axios has reported on how the Russia issue is just one of several facing big tech companies in Washington, and on Tuesday debuted new polling on the overall favorability of Facebook, Google, Twitter and several other tech companies. On Sam Clovis' nomination to a federal post, given his involvement with George Papadopoulos, who has pleaded guilty in the Russia probe, Sanders is not aware of a need to pull Clovis' nomination. On Papadopoulos. Papadopoulos is an example of somebody doing the wrong thing while the president's campaign did the right thing. On tax reform's chances in Congress. No matter how great the plan is, Democrats are putting partisan politics ahead of their constituents' pocketbooks. Sanders repeated the White House's disputed figure that the Trump's tax plan will give the typical American family a $4,000 pay raise. House Financial Services Chairman Jeb Hensarling of Texas announced Tuesday that he won't run for re-election at the end of his term, per the Dallas Morning News. Hensarling said he never intended to make it a lifetime commitment and has already stayed far longer than he had originally planned. Why it matters. Hensarling follows 10 other House Republicans, and 2 Republican Senators, Bob Corker 10, and Jeff Flake Rees, who have announced their plans to retire next year.